What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
You're not interested in art?
No.
Now look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have a conversation.
From Chicago, this is Filmspotting, celebrating our 20th year. I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar.
I've appointed you sole heir to my estate, which you may come into sooner rather than later.
Why? It's been 6 years since our last meeting.
I have my reasons.
Which are what?
My reasons? I'm not saying. I'm saying I'm not saying.
Wes Anderson and the Wes Anderson Players are back in theaters with The Phoenician Scheme. We've got a review.
Plus thoughts on the new meta music doc Pavements and the horror film Bring Her Back. That and more ahead on Filmspotting.
Welcome to Filmspotting, and Josh, welcome back from Japan. How was the trip?
Thank you. The trip was wonderful. Good to be back. I have some travelogue notes maybe later in the show I will share, because a great trip as a movie lover, not just to see the country, but just to have watched so many movies from Japan. It was really, really cool.
We did miss you, though. I think we had a couple of pretty good shows. Always fun when Michael Phillips drops in, Aisha Harris from NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour. We talked a little Mission Impossible and movie stunts. And then last week, Clueless at 30. And I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to it yet. You don't do movie quotes, but hopefully you enjoyed listening to us talk movie quotes.
It was fun, although I have to get to the top 5. Haven't made it that far. I'm in the midst of your Clueless review, which is a blast. I mean, Aisha, probably one of my top 5 movie podcasters out there. So to get to hear her on an entire show is a delight. And of course, it's always a delight to have Michael, even if the two of you were way too soft on Final Reckoning. I mean, I wanted one of you to like, and I didn't want everyone to be down on the movie. But man, both of you? Come on.
Yeah, it's fine. This week, I knew you would not want to miss this one. Wes Anderson's latest, The Phoenician Scheme. We'll have thoughts on Alex Ross Perry's Pavements. I saw that one. You saw Bring Her Back from the Aussie horror duo Danny and Michael Philippou. We'll put a bow on our Andrei Tarkovsky marathon with The Holy Fools. That's what we're calling our Andrei Tarkovsky Marathon Awards. And listeners will decide once and for all which is the best Mission: Impossible. But first, The Phoenician Scheme. It's Wes Anderson's 12th feature and his 3rd project in as many years. It follows 2023's Asteroid City and also from 23 his Oscar-winning Roald Dahl shorts. For the new film, Anderson has assembled several members of his growing ensemble, along with some new faces, for a 50-set tale about a wealthy and widely despised industrialist, Benicio del Toro's Zsa Zsa Corda, who seeks to settle his affairs, both personal and professional. Here's Del Toro with Mia Threppleton's Liesel, Corda's estranged, nun-in-training daughter.
Where's yours?
I don't have a passport. Normal people want the basic human rights that accompany citizenship in any sovereign nation. I don't. My legal residence is a shack in Portugal. My official domicile is a hut on the Black Sea. My certificated abode is a lodge perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the sub-Saharan rainforest, accessible only by goat path. I don't live anywhere. I'm not a citizen at all. I don't need my human rights.
Adam, I have a question for you that we've circled around, touched on here and there over the years, given our admiration for the movies of Wes Anderson and so many of the actors in them. What exactly makes for a standout performance in a Wes Anderson film? The writer-director has fostered career turns for a host of notable actors. My list would include these: Bill Murray in Rushmore and The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, Gene Hackman in The Royal Tenenbaums, Ray Fiennes in The Grand Budapest Hotel, Jeffrey Wright in The French Dispatch, and Jason Schwartzman and Scarlett Johansson in Asteroid City. In each case, I'd argue his movies either inspired the performers to shift into a higher gear. I'd put Murray, Fiennes, and maybe Schwartzman in this category. Or it allowed them to delightfully drill down into the qualities that have always made them distinct. Here I'm thinking of Hackman, Wright, and Johansson. And so what to make of Benicio del Toro in The Phoenician Scheme? He plays Jaja Korda, an unscrupulous business profiteer circa 1950. At the start of the film, after surviving yet another assassination attempt, Korda feels compelled to enlist his estranged daughter in his latest venture. That daughter, Liesel, is a novitiate nun played by Mia Thruppleton. He's basically seeking an heir. She hopes to steer the potential windfall toward the common good. Let's start with Del Toro, Adam. This is the first Anderson feature with a clear main character since the Grand Budapest Hotel. After featuring Del Toro in one of the segments of The French Dispatch, the director has upgraded him to lead status. How did he do?
Well, I don't know where you landed on this movie, but I think the prompt is a good one, and I'm trying to read between the lines a little bit. Of course, I could be wrong, but it suggests to me that maybe we had a similar reaction to this film. Is there a future where I revisit Phoenician and find it significantly funnier and more profound, as was the case with Grand Budapest? Yes. But unlike Korda's redemption arc, mine isn't imminent. And Del Toro's dispirited performance is a factor in my disappointment. Disclaimer. I'm a fan of Del Toro as an actor, as most, I think, intelligent cinephiles are. And I'm not suggesting that he's not committed to the performance, Josh. Of course he is. I can anticipate the rebuttal. I can understand the arguments for Del Toro's what I would call mostly deadpan, kind of above it all performance here. He's figuratively and sometimes literally an above it all character, right? Flying around the world on Air Korda, almost single-handedly shaping the course of world events. He wants to portray a coolness, a detached nature, an unflappability. What's his favorite line? I still feel very safe. Nothing phases him.
Myself.
Or he wants to.
I feel very safe.
I feel very safe. Or he wants to project that nothing is phasing him. I get it, including, it seems, having 9 sons, having 1 daughter, the death of 3 wives, several near-death experiences until this one. That's what the entire film was about. A near-death experience that finally phases him, that finally gets him to embrace his daughter, his family, life outside of business. And I wouldn't say that the performance is entirely robotic, but every line reading is just clipped enough that even with all the reasons I just gave why that choice might make some sense for the character, I never got the life, the energy, what you said maybe about shifting into high gear, the energy, I'll go back to what I said before, the spirit that I needed to sustain my interest in the character and especially that transformation. And I'd argue that that's true on its own merits, but it didn't help that very early on, you mentioned Hackman, very early on, I saw the connection between Korda's scheme, this elaborately silly plan to overhaul the infrastructure of Phoenicia that's really, it turns out, about reuniting with his daughter, and Royal Tenenbaum's scheme to find a new place to live that's really, it turns out, about reuniting with his children. The impetus for both? The fathers are dying. Except, of course, Royal is a fraud, and Jaja genuinely fears death now. He's even having dreams of being judged in the afterlife. These plague him throughout the movie. I don't say this negatively. Anderson is adding some new wrinkles, which we can perhaps get into further. But as he does, he's covering some very familiar ground, stylistically and thematically. Bad fathers, redemption, setting aside ambition, accepting simplicity and humility. A lead performer, I have some of the same ones you mentioned, not surprisingly, in my notes. A lead performer bringing some of the same vigor to Korda as Hackman would have gone a long way, I think. But not just Hackman. Fiennes in Grand Budapest, Scarlett Johansson in Asteroid City, multiple Bill Murray options, and we could list others. I think it would have helped me anyway with the Phoenician scheme.
I'm so relieved. I'm so relieved because if you had really gone for the Phoenician scheme and I had to come on this show and express my disappointment, I might have just whispered my review the only time so no one else could hear it but you, because I love Wes Anderson so much. And yeah, let's get those caveats out of the way. I agree. easily might revisit this. I'm sure I'll revisit this. I've seen it twice already. I'm sure I'll revisit it some more and come away with more admiration for it. It happens every time. I just rewatched The French Dispatch to refamiliarize myself with Del Toro's performance there, and that movie leapt in my esteem. It's shooting up my Anderson rankings. So yes, I agree with you. We may come around on this movie. I enjoyed it. I like it. I think it's good. But it was still a disappointment considering what my expectations are. And I've got to agree that Del Toro for me is a big part of it. And I'm going to offer another caveat that you did. He has a strange place in my movie history in that he's long been a favorite actor who I don't know if he's ever given a favorite performance.
That's interesting.
And what I mean by that is it's more his presence, this bulky sorrow he carries that he brings to his films that I've admired. His face, that rumpled mug, I just want to see that in every movie. And so when he shows up, he automatically is bringing something to films. I do think he's given some very good performances. Obviously, The Usual Suspects, his breakout, but smaller films like he made a melodrama with Halle Berry, Things We Lost in the Fire. He's excellent in Sicario. I think a lot of people point to in his
liked him in
filmography.
Traffic, for which he won an Oscar. Haven't
Yeah.
seen it since Traffic came out.
There you go. Traffic is a good one. And, Steven Soderbergh's 2-part revolutionary biopic, Che. He's kind of, even though he's the title character, he's a little bit at the periphery of that, but still that presence he has is so instrumental. So I have admired Del Toro for a long time, was thrilled to hear he was the focus of this. But I got to say, Adam, especially when I look back at that French Dispatch performance, the painter there, this homicidal painter, depressive painter who creates this great work while incarcerated, that seemed to fit what Del Toro does best. It allowed him to burrow into his unique presence in a better way. I would say, along with Jeffrey Wright, he kind of formed the French Dispatch's soul. And he's not allowed to do that here. This is where he's asked to stretch, and it doesn't work. I'm not saying Del Toro doesn't have range, but it doesn't work because he's asked to conform to a particular Anderson type, the one we're familiar with, fast talking, deadpan, you mentioned it. These linguistic gymnasts who perform, they stick the landing with a powerfully emotional line you didn't expect. And you can see why Anderson cast him here as Corda. You touched on some of these things. He has a weariness to him. Del Toro's face fits the part for sure. That face, even when he was young, it looked like he'd seen too much. And Corda is definitely a man who has seen and caused too much. So I get it. But whenever he's asked to deliver that fast patter, especially I found when he had to shout and get loud, it rang false to me.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's the rare case of Anderson trying to mold an actor to his style rather than offering a way for them to flourish within it. We don't see this very often. If we did an exhaustive examination, we might be able to find a few sore thumbs, I guess you could say. But for me, this is one of them. And it was a major, why the movie was, it was a major reason for my disappointment.
Yeah. Maybe the reason why I didn't mind him so much in Dispatch is some of the things you articulated there. He's more blatantly comedic. I think soulful is the right way to describe him there, but also, it's a supporting turn. And here he is asked to shoulder a little bit too much. I think it's not just Del Toro, though. And this is something else I want to get your thoughts on. But I will note, or I'll preface my comments here by saying it's probably more about the story and the structure and the size of the ensemble than it is about the performers and the performances themselves. But this is one of those Anderson instances for me where most of the characters felt like the sum of their eccentricities. If you're being reductionist about Anderson, this is the criticism that some throw at him that I don't think is usually justified, but here it felt like it was appropriate. Most of the characters were whatever weird accent and or costume and or repeated word or phrase and or mannerisms or walk that they had. I might not have guessed this going in, but the only actor for me, Josh, who got the assignment, or I guess depending on your perspective, transcended the assignment was Michael Cera.
He's brilliant.
Michael
He's
Cera
the movie's saving grace.
Brilliant. He is, right? He was the only one who had the intelligence that the film needed, who had the eccentricities, who brought the accent work and brought the humor that you needed, but also still had an intelligence and had the emotional intelligence.
Yes.
You understood what he wanted and what he needed as a character. And every single time he expressed any kind of longing for Liesel. And sometimes he's just barely expressing it. It's very subtle. It's kind of seeping out of him. And other times he can't stop it from coming out. You really do feel something and feel for him as a character. I felt like, Josh, within the first 5 minutes of him being on screen, Michael Cera just has to be in every Wes Anderson movie after this. And there are others like Bryan Cranston and Tom Hanks who I think are good. Obviously, they're very good actors, and we've seen Tom Hanks and Cranston as well in other films of Anderson's, including Hanks in Asteroid City. But when you see them in this film, if they made you laugh or you like certain line deliveries or that sequence itself is something you found amusing, I don't begrudge you any of that. But for me, I needed more. I needed more from those sequences than just goofy line deliveries. And I felt like in the case of most of these sequences, that's what I was getting, including Jeffrey Wright. Talk about feeling like I'm getting an actor who he has used so brilliantly before and was just given nothing to do.
Yeah, he's a one joke character. For sure. And to your point, part of this is the nature of the storyline where he's having these series of meetings with different people.
Right.
So most of them are just going to appear in a short scene. I think that I would put on the list of those who transcend that structure and make their scenes count. I would put Tom Hanks. I would put Bryan Cranston. I think they're great, this basketball game they play. And I would also put Richard Ayoade, who showed up recently as part of the troupe. And I think he's just a natural fit. But let me go back to Cera, because it's sort of a like, yes, of course. Of course he would be able to do this, just his other comic performances. But you are so right about the emotional notes he also brings to it. And I think he does fall into that category of getting the opportunity to shift into a new gear. I think Cera has given performances that have hinted at this. He's not always just purely comic. But this really allows it to flower. I'm not going to deliver the line the way he does. I'll save it for a Massacre Theater a few years from now.
In the future,
but
yeah.
I think he should get a Best Supporting Actor nomination for the way he pronounces holy moly at one moment. That is, if you're tentative about seeing the Phoenician Scheme, go see it for that. It's worth it. It's worth it for Cera's overall performance. Before we move on from performances, we should probably at least weigh in on Mia Threppleton, who is essentially a co-lead here as Liesel, a relative newcomer, certainly new to me, though she has done some work. And I'll just say, she has the deadpan demeanor down. She fits more naturally than Del Toro does, but maybe almost too well. I did feel that she built this emotional fortress that the character does that fits, but doesn't allow it to be penetrated in the way the best Anderson performers give you glimpses of the cracks and I love that you said seep. That is such a great word for how emotion comes through in Anderson films. It's just like little drips or cracks. And I don't know, again, her first performance in a film of his, I think she's very good, but it for me was missing that until fairly far on, this possibility of romance comes in. And then I believe she starts to show us a few cracks and is really good. So I think she's promising. I think she's good here, but maybe, not a highlight as in the same way that Cera is.
Yeah, I had some of the same reservations that I expressed with Del Toro as well. The tough part of all this, look, it's the subjectivity of comedy especially. And this is a comedy. My theater wasn't very full. I mean, there were at least 20 people there, maybe more, and it wasn't very raucous with laughter. Not that that really matters either. But Josh, I will say there was a woman directly behind me in the theater, and I am not exaggerating when I estimate, she must have laughed 250 to 300 times throughout this movie. The movie is like 105 minutes.
Good for
and
her.
she expressed some form of amusement at least 2.5 times per minute. And I don't know if it was just her type of kind of absurdist humor, or is she some kind of Anderson super fan, because it was almost like the anticipation of something funny happening was enough. Show Michael Cera sitting in the chair, laugh.
She's cracking
Cut to
up.
the shoe boxes on the floor, laugh. Every single choice Anderson made provoked a laugh for her. I know our producer, Sam, had a similar response to the film. He's going to be very unhappy listening to this review.
He's
going to be firing off
his
scathing
Letterboxd review.
Slack,
I know.
Yeah, Slack comments to us. But I just felt like I was in a constant state of anticipation. I was just waiting for the amusement. And I think that structure and all the things we've talked about is part of it. Jokes without stakes isn't that much different for me than drama without stakes. And when you've constructed your entire plot around what is so clearly a MacGuffin, where none of the details matter, you just recognize early on that the details of the Phoenician scheme are not what this is about. And that's fine. I can buy into that. But then I also understood, or felt like I understood, where this was going. I didn't really feel like I was going to get any surprises around where the emotional beats were going to be. I didn't feel like I did truly get maybe any really great revelations until the very end of the film around that, to be totally honest. And so I didn't have any work to do. It didn't give me anything to do to be really engaged in terms of the story, or to be engaged by these characters. And then coming off, I know this really isn't fair, but the only reason I'm even saying it, Josh, is this is Wes Anderson, who, as we noted, not only are we both fans of his work, but he does fit that capital A auteur billing, where there are threads stylistically and there are threads thematically throughout all of his work. And so when he's made now, what did we say? This is his 12th film. And when I've only had 2 for me that haven't worked, and one of them, I think I still gave a favorable review to, Darjeeling Limited. And I've only seen it once, back when it came out in 2007 or whatever. So who knows how I'd feel about it now? I mean, it's been almost 20 years. Only 2, again, that I say I'm not really, really high on. You have to wonder, well, what it is about this film that isn't working for me. And I go back to the last film I saw. Asteroid City just stirred me so much. I'll use these words again, intellectually and emotionally for me. And this movie just left me so dead on arrival. And so I'm in this state where I'm comparing it. I'm trying to grab onto or latch on to what it is about this movie that didn't work. And it is something about the lack of emotion that I can attach to the characters and those storylines, and the absence of stakes. And I think it also has something to do with the absence of any kind of stakes or arc really with the characters. I'm not saying there isn't an arc. We know where that redemption arc is going. Yeah. We know where it's going from the very beginning. It is there. But the kind of flimsiness, the silliness of the plot, I think ultimately for me worked against it.
I don't know that I'd agree that, for me, humor has to have stakes, because as you're describing those shoeboxes that the woman laughed at, this is at the beginning where Corda is describing his grand scheme to Liesel, and he has each stage of it in a shoebox, and then it'll cut to like, well, there's a glove box that has another, and there's a reason why it's in a glove box and not a shoebox. That makes me laugh. There's really nothing important about it, but I do get that sort of humor. And I will also say similarly, and here are some reasons I want to move into why I would still recommend the film, even though it's lesser Wes Anderson for me. Similarly, that opening credit sequence, which is an overhead shot of Corda in a bathtub. Yeah. And in this elaborate bathroom with tile, and there are women in nurses' uniforms moving back and forth. There is a bidet on the top of the screen where a champagne bottle is chilling in some ice. I mean, these are like, I can see why that woman is laughing so much, because that is a fixed shot that is not only very funny because of touches like that, but it is a brilliant example of blocking and choreography and patterns. Some of it is funny. Some of it is just beautiful. It's character work. We're learning so much about Korda, even though we're not even seeing his face. And, you know, there are filmmakers who could go an entire career and never create something as masterful as the Phoenician Scheme's opening credit sequence.
I had high hopes after that. I did.
And so there's a lot of good stuff here. But to go back to some of your reservations, which I would just echo, is, you know, a lot of the gags and phrases repeat. More so, it feels to me, than in other films. The joke about the business negotiations devolving into shouting matches, I wouldn't have laughed alongside the woman the first time, and we get that every time. As you pointed out, this redemption of the rapscallion at the hands of family members, much better done in Royal Tenenbaum, Steve Zissou, and I would argue as well, fantastic Mr. Fox. And here's one thing that I wouldn't expect to bother maybe most viewers, and bother is a strong word, disappoint again, I'll lean on that, but I did want to get your feelings on, is I found for as much religious content there was in here.
This is where I was going to go next.
This to me, again, eager to dig into some reviews that are looking at this explicitly, I found it to be religiously overt and theologically thin. And the only reason I would say that, now let me just tick some of the references here so people who might not have seen it yet know. Religiosity is all over the movie. Liesel, of course, is this novitiate nun. She accuses her father of unholy mischief. I like how he says to her, well, you can still believe in God if you want, but he takes away her rosary and gives her this, you know, secular, bejeweled one. There are those afterlife visions of Korda you've already mentioned where Bill Murray shows up as God. The word biblical is thrown about quite a bit. But I really found it to be just referential religiosity. And I have found a lot of his other movies to offer, perhaps unintentionally, but very resonant spiritual significance. I would point particularly to The French Dispatch and the use of color in black and white. I've written about, the significance of those. I'm not going to go into all of this here, but Rushmore for me, the Grand Budapest Hotel, and of course the yearning in Steve Zissou, which why I like that movie more than most people, and the symbolism of the jaguar shark and the search for transcendence. So I have found a lot of spiritual resonance in Anderson's movies. Maybe I'm one of a few people who are reading them that way. But seeing all of these religious touchstones in the Phoenician Scheme perked my ears up, of course, and yet there wasn't a lot underneath it. Yeah. This movie's highest, I would say this movie's what it believes in the most. And again, this is fine if this is what Anderson wants to posit. I just think it's less interesting to me, is sincerity. Sincerity is the ultimate good in this movie. And there's a key scene where Liesel and Korda are talking about prayers. And I think she says something about how she doesn't pray. Praying isn't just asking for what you want and getting it. What matters, she says, is the sincerity of your devotion. And Korda responds, that's it. And this is really a trajectory of them reaching a point of sincerity with each other. Their first meeting, neither one of them is sincere. He offers this quick apology about not seeing her for 6 years. She does the sign of the cross real quick and says, I forgive you. Neither of them mean it in that moment, right? But we see them move towards points of sincerity as the movie progresses in their relationship, in their being in the world. And I think that's well and good. That's a, an interesting theme of its own. It's just maybe a little thinner than what I've been able to mine from some of his other movies.
Sure. And going back to Royal Tenenbaums for a second, the reason why a moment like the one at the end between Royal and Chaz resonates with us so strongly when he says, I've had a really tough year, and he says, I know you have, Chazzy. It's them being empathetic with each other, but it's also them being sincere with each other. It's not as if they haven't been truthful with each other. I think they've both been truthful with each other at different points throughout the movie, in some cases very harshly. So, but they're being sincere in that moment. And we don't necessarily feel like we get a lot of sincerity in Wes Anderson's films. And so when the movie builds up to a moment like that, it feels really earned, and that movie earns it. And so that for me was another connection there when we get that exchange in this movie. I wanted to go there. Certainly, this is more your corner than mine, and I think you expressed that really well. I wouldn't disagree with you, but when I alluded earlier to there being a few new wrinkles, doesn't necessarily mean they're good wrinkles, but at least it's different, and it sounds like it is. You're saying it's more overt here. I don't remember from his previous films him dealing this directly with the spiritual, with these types of sequences where we have characters who are openly wrestling with the notion of an afterlife, wrestling with the notion of judgment. And
Yeah, it's pretty new.
I won't spoil it, but when we have a character like Zsa Zsa face off with another character later in the film who he refers to as biblical, I took that to mean he's using biblical there in the sense as otherworldly. I'm taking that to mean inhuman. Almost not that religion is monstrous necessarily, but otherworldly as in monstrous, as in the opposite of real. And he's been on this journey towards becoming an actual real person in the world, part of the real world, not above it all. And this character is portrayed even that way. He is portrayed like an otherworldly, supernatural kind of biblical figure, someone you don't believe is part of this world. And so that was interesting to me. I think I agree with you that I'm not necessarily convinced that he's doing it in anything more than a very superficial way, but it's there in a way that I hadn't seen before. And those black and white sequences to me felt like something more out of like a Dreyer film than a Wes Anderson film.
Bit.
So again, interesting. The other part that was new to me, and I want to be clear about this, even watching this film and what I'm about to say, I don't think Wes Anderson, my feeling watching a Wes Anderson film is that there's no part of him as a screenwriter or filmmaker who's paying a whole lot of attention to the real world that's happening around us, the political world.
Okay.
I don't think he's that caught up with, Josh, or that interested in being overt about making those connections anyway. Okay. I think he does want to make larger statements about the kind of things we're talking about the kind of person that you are, about being a real person in the real world, and about being a sincere person. I think those things matter. And unfortunately, those types of phrases these days make you a political person, right? In the world that we live in. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, I suppose. But what I'm arguing is that he's someone who is not overtly political, and he's not someone who is trying to make films that are allegorical statements that are about one-to-one connections to things that are happening in our world today. Nevertheless, when you have a main character like the one we have here in Corda, who is this industrialist, who is this businessman who is caught up in the gaps in economics, and we're talking about widgets, right? And where money windfalls are going to come from, it does connect Anderson to the real world in a way most of his other films, if not all of his other films, have been a little bit more Fantasyland, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, this is is Corda a Trump figure? Is Corda a Musk figure? Question which definitely crossed my mind. I dismissed it fairly quickly because I was in a Wes Anderson movie and didn't want to think about either of them.
Sure.
But I think, and further reflection, I can see it. It doesn't entirely work that way for me, but I will say, we mentioned Sam's more positive response, our producer, and he does, when he wrote about this on Letterboxd, give an interesting reading of Corda in this light. So I can understand how that it might strike people that way, even though it didn't have a lot of traction for me.
No,
and just to offer.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. It doesn't for me either. Ultimately, that's where I'm going. It doesn't for me either, though I do think, just to repeat what I said a little bit here, I think it is a little bit more connected to the real world than I usually come away with from Wes Anderson.
Yeah. But
the bigger point is just that you have, what I think is interesting is you have a character in Corda who is caught up in, it goes back to this ambition idea. He is swept up in the idea of this scheme which is all about, we don't even know what it's about, but it seems like he is obsessed with the idea of whatever he does for the world, whether it helps people, hurts people, or whatever, it's all about being something grand, profound, having his name on it, it being the kind of thing that people know he did it, and it was this sweeping, momentous thing that affected humanity. And without giving away the ending, what he comes to learn more than anything by the end is not just that he has to change what kind of person he is, it's that the types of change that you can actually enact on society, the types of things you can do, can actually be very little things.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to be those types of things.
And I should say, I really like the ending. I
do too.
You know, I think we know it's going there, but I think it's handled in a lovely way, with a patience, with a quietness. Notice that Korda doesn't talk very much, and it allows Del Toro to get back to what he did in The French Dispatch, where his painter did not talk very much, but it allows him just to be in the scene. And so I really like the ending of The Phoenician Scheme. Let me just offer a little bit of a defense of Anderson. To my mind, as a political filmmaker, though, you're correct. He's never very overt about it. But the first time I started to think about him this way was probably The Grand Budapest Hotel. Again, fictional histories, fictional countries, but definitely confronted what it means as a person to be caught up in the flow of fascism. And that made me think, you know, I think we got a hint of this in something like the Darjeeling Limited, which I would agree with you is one of his lesser films as well. And that is maybe a clumsier attempt in how he engages with Indian culture. There are some, questions about that now, but I think you can see a person trying to think about living in a world and connecting with a world that is not your world. And so that's a little hint of it. And, you know, beyond Grand Budapest, I consider, and I think we talked about this a little bit, Isle of Dogs as being this story of, you know, again, a domineering government forcing deportation. We were in the first cycle of that when that movie came out. And now we're in the more rancid, alarming, terrifying cycle of it this time. Now, that's not something that the Phoenician Scheme necessarily addresses, but to my mind, Isle of Dogs absolutely does.
That's a good point.
So I think he has that ability.
Yeah, he does. Of all of his films, that one probably stands out the most. And I hear what you're saying about Grand Budapest. That's certainly there. But even that film, those questions aren't the ones I come away from that movie thinking about. They're not the questions I come away even from.
It's not the prime concern of the film.
Yeah.
I would say.
I was trying to think of, I had another film of his that has a government connection. Oh, Asteroid City. Even that film that obviously has the government directly involved. I don't come away from that movie thinking about the government or politics as the key element of it, but you're right. But you're right. It's definitely there. The Phoenician Scheme is currently out in wide release. If you see it and agree or disagree with our takes, you can email us, feedback@filmspotting.net.
Our objective, disrupting, obstructing, impeding, crippling Korda's enterprise in any manner possible.
Get the hand grenades.
Listening is the number one thing you can do to support an independently produced show like ours. There are a couple of other things you can do. Take a minute to give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Doesn't matter if you're a first-time listener or if you've been listening for 20 years, every new review helps us reach new listeners. Another way to support us, join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. We want to thank family member Eric Sullivan right here in Chicago. Eric's letterbox handle is Epsully, EPSULLY. I'm happy to follow him there.
Eric writes, I first heard about you through WBEZ ads after moving to Chicago in 2013, but the first episode I ever caught was the top 10 of 2017 with Michael Phillips and Tasha Robinson. I had recently gotten MoviePass, and with it, the number of films I watched skyrocketed, so I was desperately looking for some context to help organize my chaotic viewing. I loved the marathon conversation of the top 10 so much, I immediately made a list of all the films mentioned still in theaters that I hadn't seen yet so I could add them to MoviePass's rapidly declining credit report.
The days of MoviePass. was quite a little drama for a while there.
I think we even had 1 or 2 ads for MoviePass.
We might have.
You know, they just went in the tank. Favorite review or segment? I loved the Christopher Nolan Oeuvre review. Nolan was one of the first filmmakers. I made a conscious effort to check off his filmography when I first got into movies in high school, so it felt like fate that he was the first director to get the Oeuvre review treatment. Please keep this segment coming. Yeah, we've been out of the Oeuvre review game for a while, and I love that every time I say that, I think about the people, a couple of people who have written in over the years and told us that we were mispronouncing the word. I can't shake that. No, we're not. We made up a new word. It's Oeuvre review.
You gotta love the correctors out there.
Yes. But we have been out of this game for a while. That was something we started during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's something, it's our marathons, except it's not marathons, because rather than filling in blind spots, we are actually just revisiting or visiting the entire filmography.
Start to
good
finish.
Idea. It's like
a great idea.
It's the blank check thing, basically.
Wait, somebody else is doing this?
Yeah, it's kind of blank check, but without the humor. Really? A review we got wrong. Only Adam really got this wrong, but Booksmart is one of the best comedies I've seen, and I will hear no arguments to the contrary. Okay, I won't argue with you. Letterboxd top 4, Spirited Away, The Sting, Casablanca, and Her.
Okay.
Good stuff. Favorite movie revisited recently, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a random film or filmmaker that Eric loves, Sorry to Bother You, and a movie he credits with becoming a cinephile. You don't hear this one often, Slumdog Millionaire, Danny Boyle. Thank you, Eric, for being part of the family and for all of those years of listening. In addition to keeping us doing what we're doing, your support comes with perks. You get to listen early and ad-free. You get Sam's weekly newsletter. You get exclusive opportunities like being part of the Filmspotting Family Discord, and you get our monthly bonus shows. We are looking ahead a couple of weeks to our bonus show for June. Our plan is to share our performances of the year so far. That is in anticipation of the show we will share in our main feed in July, our top 5 films of the year so far. Sounds like Michael Cera's got a pretty good shot at making most of our list, Josh.
I'll be talking about another film on this episode that has a strong contender performance for that list.
Filmspottingfamily.com is where you can learn more.
In the world of matchmaking,
This weekend, your client is getting
no one plays the game better than Lucy.
6'2", doctor, lawyer, banker.
I get along much better with girls in their 20s.
But love isn't part of her equation.
I don't want to fight about money with my boyfriend.
Do you know how hard it is to make you happy?
That's from the trailer for Materialist, the latest from Past Lives director Celine Song. It opens in wide release this weekend. Dakota Johnson, Josh, is a Manhattan matchmaker for the rich and powerful who finds herself in a love and money triangle between Pedro Pascal's rich investor and her poor, semi-employed actor ex-boyfriend, Chris Evans. Who are you picking, Josh, in that competition?
Great question. I just don't know how you can go in any direction other than Pedro Pascal. And I say that, now I forget where he ranked on our Chris Evans power rankings.
Pedro?
One of our best shows. No, Chris Evans. I mean, I'm a big fan of Chris Evans. You know, and so, yeah, I thought about this a little bit, but really, come on. It's got to be Pedro Pascal. Plus, I want to go, you know, the way this is set up, he's the guy you're not supposed to like, right?
Yeah,
you're supposed to like the semi-employed actor ex-boyfriend. I'm going to buck that trend. I'm going to buck the romantic comedy trend and go with the rich investor.
Yeah, I mean, I like to eat. I'm going with Pedro Pascal. Now, I read that plot description as if you didn't know. Is it possible that you have already caught up with Materialist?
No, I will be seeing it depending on how long this recording goes.
Oh, yeah, you got to get there. So I got to talk faster.
Later tonight. Yeah, let's move it along.
We will have a review of Materialist next week. Also, we'll review Mike Flanagan's The Life of Chuck, starring Tom Hiddleston. That expands to more screens this weekend. What about that one? Josh, any luck seeing
Need
The
to
Life
catch
of
up
Chuck?
with that one. We'll be doing it later this week.
Yeah, we have some viewing ahead of us. For a schedule of our future shows, including that Best of the Year So Far episode that's coming and our top 5 Jack Nicholson scenes. Yeah, talk about some homework we need to do. We are tying that in with our One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest Sacred Cow / Pantheon project review coming up. You can visit filmspotting.net/episodes.
I can understand you're very upset. Kittredge, you've never seen me very upset. All right, Hunt. Enough is enough. You have bribed, cajoled, and killed, and you have done it using loyalties on the inside. You want to shake hands with the devil, that's fine with me. I just want to make sure that you do it in hell.
A great scene from the one that started it all, Tom Cruise and Henry Czerny in 1996's Mission Impossible, directed by Brian De Palma. This is radio, so you'll have to conjure up the Dutch angles on your own. It's time for some poll results. A couple of weeks back, guest Michael Phillips and I had a review of the 8th and presumably final Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. We also shared our top 5 movie stunts, and we asked you to choose one and only one Mission Impossible film. Let's get to the results. I don't think we need to read the options. We know there have been 8 Missions Impossible. So Josh, let's get to the results.
In last place with 0.5. Am I reading this correctly? 0.5% of the vote?
I guess Sam decided to throw The Final Reckoning a bone.
Okay. And apparently you and Michael voted for it, though it came in last place. Here we have next Mission Impossible 2, the John Woo installment, 1% there. Maybe that's John Woo's vote. I don't know. Dead Reckoning, 2%. Mission Impossible 3, that one came from J.J. Abrams, 7% of the vote. Then we get into the top tier, the stronger tier of films, I would say. Ghost Protocol from Brad Bird received 14% of the vote. Rogue Nation, Christopher McQuarrie on that one, 19% of the vote. Jumping back to the very first film, De Palma's, that received 23% of the vote, but winning it was a McQuarrie installment. Fallout got 34% of the vote.
So that was my pick. That was Aisha's pick. Did we get your vote at any point? I guess not, right, Josh?
I don't think so. I don't think I weighed in on this.
Do you have a favorite?
I have, Fallout for me is at number 2, so totally understand it. Completely reasonable pick. I have as my favorite Rogue Nation, and I have as my reason Rebecca Ferguson.
Sure. She's also in Fallout, so I can claim that reason too.
That's true. Yeah, Fallout, she introduced though, right? That
I think so.
That dress at the opera, that goes a long way for me.
Okay, let's hear from our listeners. Richard Breen says, I rewatched the entire series before Dead Reckoning and rewatched Dead Reckoning before The Final Reckoning. For me, without question, Fallout is the best and the only bona fide 5-star classic in the series. As others have said, Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa Faust is the standout female lead of the series, and I also like the genuine personal stakes at the end with the reintroduction of Michelle Monaghan's Julia into the mix.
Here's Dave Allen. I voted for Mission Impossible 1 due to its excellent pacing, directing, and interesting camera shots, all hallmarks of a good Brian De Palma film. Mission Impossible 3 is a very close second for me, though, with its pivot to Ethan's private life and an all-time great villain in Philip Seymour Hoffman.
I'm going to hurt her. Aaron Teachman in L.A.
Bonus Massacre Theater.
I am an absolute sucker for this franchise. I will watch any of them at the drop of a hat, even Woo's weird ripoff of Notorious. I revisited the original not too long ago, and it is a great spy thriller, no question, but where the series swerves and sticks the landing the absolute best, where character and stunts are wonderfully in balance, I have to go with our introduction to Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa. There it is, Josh, 2015's Rogue Nation.
I like it. Here's Colton Butcher. This is one of the most stable franchises we have. Even the bad ones are at minimum entertaining. I am a Mission Impossible 2 apologist. For me, the series really nailed it with Ghost Protocol. The globe-trotting, the gadgets, the quippy dialogue, and the stellar action set pieces. I put so much of the success of this movie on the shoulders of Brad Bird. He has a real knack for action. I'm thinking The Incredibles and even Ratatouille's small-scale set pieces. He also brought a joy and cartoon chaos to the series that feels really fresh. Though I've enjoyed McQuarrie's films, I wish Bird would have been the one to helm this franchise. The Burj Khalifa stunt is my favorite in the whole series. Cruise running across and scaling down the tallest building in the world will never not be breathtaking.
Finally, here's Tori Lightcap, 4 words, Henry Cavill, arm reloading. 2 more words, Josh. Fall Out. That's the movie the arm reloading appears in. Thank you to everyone who voted and left a comment. We have our definitive winner. Our new poll asks you to pick a Wes Anderson film, but only from his output over the last decade. So this is post Grand Budapest Hotel. Josh, the options in chronological order are
Isle of Dogs, The French Dispatch, Asteroid City, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and 3 more, or The Phoenician Scheme.
Well, you said that the French Dispatch has now shot up your ranking, or it's edging its way up there. So where are you going with this one?
It certainly is, but not enough to move ahead of Isle of Dogs. I'm a sucker for his stop motion stuff in general. And that one is so rich that it's firmly rooted at, I think, number 2 or number 3, possibly in my rankings for Wes Anderson films. So I'm going to go Isle of Dogs. How about you?
Well, I was trying, as you were talking, I was hoping you were going to tap dance a little bit more and I would bring up my Wes Anderson. There it is. Bring up my Wes Anderson ranking and see what I have. Well, okay, there's my answer. That is not exactly how I thought it would go. I thought for sure my answer was going to be Asteroid City.
Yeah.
But at least according to my ranked Wes Anderson list over on Letterboxd, which hasn't been updated since October 2021. So it's missing at least the
Doll
shorts
films, yeah,
and
right.
the doll films, right? I have Isle of Dogs at 5.
Okay.
I have Isle of Dogs at 5, just
It's
after
so good.
Grand Budapest Hotel. The last time I watched that, which I don't think was for the show, we may have talked about it briefly, but I think it was just as part of a COVID watch of Anderson's films with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
I just really went for that film. I liked it when we reviewed it. I reviewed it positively, but I really went for it when I rewatched it. So I guess I have to answer Isle of Dogs, even though I thought my answer was Asteroid City. There you go.
Well, and a revisit of Asteroid City, might push it ahead. But hey, if there's a takeaway and you haven't checked out Isle of Dogs yet, if you're like, I like his stuff, not the stop motion, really give it a shot because it's so good. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Vote in that poll and leave a comment at filmspotting.net. And before we move on to your Japan talk here, Josh, very fitting with Isle of Dogs. Maybe I can actually look at filmspotting.net and just give everyone a quick glance, because Sam likes to post these poll questions before we read them here on the show. It is very, very early in voting, but it is Asteroid City and Isle of Dogs that right now are duking it out for that top spot. Again, very early in voting. Now, that's out of the way. Tell us a little bit about Japan and any Filmspotting listeners who you had the chance to meet up with.
We did have a meetup, which was fantastic. And yeah, the reason I just wanted to say a few things is because this really is a cinephile dream destination. There's a movie everywhere you look. And I'm by no means an expert in Japanese cinema, so you don't have to be. I just think most movie fans have seen enough to feel like you're kind of walking through so many of those movies. Obviously, Miyazaki was everywhere, especially once we got outside of the major cities and a little bit into the mountains alongside these volcanic cliffs of one of the coasts where the water was just like exploding, very Ponyo. Yeah, I mentioned to you and Sam, we had talked about there's Ghibli Park, which you can go visit. And I've heard wonderful things. And we didn't put it on our itinerary because it would have meant a whole extra day. It's not like near a major destination. And I just kind of thought, I hope I'll get enough of that sense just being in these other areas of the country. And that was absolutely the case. I mean, some of these traditional inns we stayed in echoed Ozu's domestic spaces. The castles we were able to see are, Kurosawa's samurai films. And then Tokyo itself, you've got, Satoshi Kon's Tokyo Godfathers came to mind, but other anime, Makoto Shinkai's Weathering with You, Your Name, this stuff, it's just everywhere. So really encourage anyone, if this is maybe on a travel list and you're a movie fan, to give you a push to go ahead and do it.
And real quick, Josh, you may not remember it, and also just for the benefit of our listeners, back when we reviewed in the last year or two the Wim Wenders film Perfect Days, and we did our top 5, I think, Tokyo movies, I brought up, or I put on my top 5 list, Tokyo Ga, which is a Wenders documentary from 1985. That's essentially the conceit of that film, is that Wenders was such a fan of Ozu. So it's Ozu focused, but he went to Japan and was like, I can't view Japan through any lens but through the lens of Ozu films. And that's how he went through the country, basically, was filming it, but having to visit all the different landmarks that he saw in Ozu's movies. So I highly recommend that film if you haven't seen it, Tokyo Ga.
And that's on my list. I honestly, I came home and was like, I only want to rewatch every Japanese movie I've ever seen, and I only want to watch Japanese movies going forward or Japanese related. I think we might have seen one of those bathrooms in Perfect Days. Actually, the one where you can see into it, and then when you lock the door, like colors cover unless maybe those are common, but we saw one like that for sure. Okay, the meetup, so much fun. I have to thank at the top here, Mila, a listener who started listening to us, she said, because she just wanted to improve her English and was looking for podcasts and has been listening for a long time. But she made the reservations for us at this great cocktail spot. There were these tea-infused cocktails. Adam, you know I'm a tea drinker, so those were quite delicious. Thank you, Mila. We also met up with Michael, who recruited 2 friends who like movies, haven't listened, and he thought, here's a way to hook them. So I hope David and Greg, you guys are listening. Joe and Felicity, so great to meet the 2 of them. I think Joe is maybe more of the regular listener, but Felicity, his wife, really brought it when we were talking about our favorite films of the last 25 years, came in with a Meeks Cutoff poll. So that was fantastic. Tom, who was there, Tom has lived in Tokyo, or Japan at least, for 35 years, originally from Wisconsin, says he's never going back. And then Terrence as well, who might have been the longest time listener there. I think I have that right. Certainly he was there within the first year or 2, I believe Terrence said. So good to meet those listeners. And then I have to mention Yotaro. So Yotaro, Debbie and I went for a food tour the night before, and a lot of fun. 2 guides. Yotaro was one of them. And, you know, if you've ever done one of these, you hit a couple spots and you walk to them. So you're chatting in between. Pretty quickly realized hardcore cinephile. Like this, I forget how it came up, but he knows his stuff. And I feel bad towards the end of the tour. The 2 of us kind of just drifted towards the back and we're just talking movies. And I kind of stole one of the guides for the rest of the night. But yeah, I just said to him, hey, why don't you join us tomorrow night if you can? So he came, and it was great to have him as part of that. Hopefully he is listening now as well. And yeah, to bring it back, Adam, to Isle of Dogs and Lost in Translation. I was curious to hear from him how movies like that are received in Japan, because I know there's some talk stateside about cultural appropriation, or Lost in Translation's case, you know, the depiction of the Japanese in that movie. And real quick, just a couple funny things Yotaro told me is, at least in the people he talked to, Lost in Translation, he said, yes, was a little insulting, but not wrong. So that was his feedback on that. And Isle of Dogs, he just said, everyone I know loves Wes Anderson and completely understands that everything there was from a place of like deep admiration and appreciation and celebration in Isle of Dogs, at least. So not saying everyone has to feel that way. I think concerns about, you know, the references to Japanese culture there are legit if you feel that way, but just interesting to hear that perspective from Yotaro. So yeah, thanks to those folks for meeting up. It was a great chance to do that while we were traveling.
Yeah, that's very cool. And we knew this already, but I'll go ahead and underline it here. I previously had the record for farthest flung meetup, Helsinki, from Chicago to Helsinki. This was back in maybe 2008. I think 4 listeners came to that meetup. And it was cool. It was great. It was incredible that there were 4 listeners in Helsinki meeting me at a bar, right? Chicago to Helsinki, about 4,500 miles away. You met up with listeners in Oslo, Norway, right? That's about 4,000. So
it was a good time.
I just Googled it. That's 6,300 miles to Tokyo. So I think the only way we're going to beat that is if one of us gets to Australia someday. I don't know. Maybe you've already been to Australia, Josh, before you joined the show?
No, I would love to. And I have a sense it'd probably be a pretty good size.
It would be a good size meetup.
So let's put that on the to-do list.
Yeah, there's some film festivals there. We can justify that.
For sure.
We got to do it.
Please welcome Pavement!
They're the best band in the 90s.
For kids who felt like everything was stupid and everything sucked, they were your band.
That's from the trailer for Pavements, the, quote, real film about a fake film about the world's most important band from director Alex Ross Perry. We reviewed a handful of his films on the show, Adam. Her Smell, Queen of Earth, Listen Up, Philip.
I've interviewed him too on the show.
There you go. The band is Pavement, which had a critically acclaimed, popularly ignored run of 5 albums between 1992 and 1999. What do you think of this film, Adam? And what, if any, relationship did you have with Pavement before seeing it? That was our prime, I'm thinking like college years. So I had a good friend who had much better taste in music than me, even though I thought I had great taste then. Greg Van Dyke, I don't know if he listens, but shouting him out, he was into Pavement. I heard Pavement when I hung out with him. But other than that, I wasn't too familiar. How about you?
I think when I got to college, I was still listening to hair metal. So I definitely wasn't listening to Pavement.
Oh boy.
And never got in to Pavement. Before I watched this film, I only knew Stephen Malkmus by reputation. His name came up enough in certain circles that it's like when you're in cinephile circles and certain directors would get named or movies would get name dropped and you'd be like, oh, I have to nod and act like I know who they're talking about. That's what would happen with Malkmus and Pavement, but I never knew who they were talking about. And now that I've seen this movie, which I'm a big fan of, I have a feeling I'm going to go down the rabbit hole here on Spotify pretty soon. We see this footage pretty early in the movie from MTV. Beavis and Butthead hilariously suggested Pavement needed to try harder.
Oh no, it's another one of these. They need to try harder.
Yeah, it's like they're not even trying. Come on. I want you to start over again, and this time try.
Because, they're like this slacker band, right? You certainly can't lob that criticism at Alex Ross Perry, who crafts a mock biopic, art installation, and jukebox musical, all in service of a heartfelt documentary tribute. That plot synopsis doesn't really do the movie justice because, yes, there is a fake movie, right? This mock biopic that is a huge part of the documentary. But the movie really isn't at its core about the fake movie. The fake movie is there really because it's there to serve, I think, the documentary itself. Late in the movie, Scott Canberg, a member of the band who goes by Spiral Stairs, he's being interviewed at the opening of the art show. And he says something that really resonated with me.
So you're just arriving. This must be a little overwhelming.
Sorry, I'm just freaked out.
Yeah, right? This is your life.
Start crying.
I thought it was supposed to be fake. This is all real.
There are so many layers of artifice to this movie, Josh, as you can imagine. Who knows exactly what he's referencing when he says, I thought this was supposed to be fake? It's not clear. All of these events or works were invented for the movie. They aren't happening independently of the movie. So in that sense, they aren't real. Our friend, Griffin Newman from Blank Check, isn't really playing the drummer, Steve West, in a Pavement biopic called Range Life. He's playing drummer Steve West in a Pavement biopic called Range Life that's being spoofed in the documentary Pavements. But here's the thing. When you amass a bunch of real paraphernalia and ephemera from the band's past and display it in a space and then bring together in that space the band and fans and others as if it's an actual art exhibit and it provokes an actual emotional response in people, then guess what? It's an art exhibit. And that's kind of how the movie, the entire movie functions. The soundtrack to the end montage is the final song of the musical that Alex Ross Perry has created. Composed, by the way, by Keegan DeWitt, who did the music for Hearts Beat Loud, that really good Nick Offerman movie from a few years ago. Yeah. And the final song is this collage of multiple Pavement tunes. And we're seeing some of the song being performed as part of the musical, but it's mixed with highlights from the band's final performance of the tour in 2022 that the doc is covering, the performance, the rehearsals that the movie covers, footage from the past. It's basically a snapshot of the entire film, right? It's the end montage. And here I'm going to reference another line from the movie. When talking about why he conceived the musical, this is like 10 or 15 minutes into the movie, Perry on camera says, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny to take all these Pavement songs, slacker songs, alternative, whatever you want to call it, ironic, put them in the most sincere art form possible, musical theater, see if it works. Well, not only does it work, all of a sudden, it starts getting a little dusty sitting on my couch, watching people in a fake musical sing songs I don't know by a band I don't have any connection to, which says something about Malkmus as a songwriter. It also says something about, I suppose, how much of a sucker I am for the sincerity of musical theater. There's that word again, sincerity. And, you know, Malkmus, he has some of that Dylan-esque innately caginess about him, though caginess probably isn't the right word because unlike Dylan, he's not remotely as antagonistic. There's a little bit of it there, but he's not as antagonistic. It's more of that kind of apathetic unwillingness to fully engage with anyone who's trying to engage with him. It's a lack of desire or just energy to be understood. But, you know, Perry, he does what any good filmmaker, any good documentarian does. He meets him and he meets the band and its legacy on their own terms with this low-key, chaotic, absurdist pastiche. I really dug the film, and yeah, wasn't kidding. I haven't done it just yet because I just finished the film today, but I certainly heard enough songs that I was interested in to want to devote some real energy to hearing the band. I'm a little embarrassed that it's taken me this long, especially because I should have been experiencing it as it was happening, as you suggested, but that just wasn't the case for me. So better late than never, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. And wow, I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about Pavements, but that was a rave. So definitely going to have to catch up with this one.
Pavements is in limited release, including in Chicago. Quick note too, if you want to hear, I'm hoping they're going to rave about it. I'm assuming at least two people will, because it's entirely possible, Josh, that Keith Phipps and Scott Tobias were the first two people in my life who I heard talk about Stephen Malkmus.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe Tasha will be the contrarian, as she often is there, and we'll see what Genevieve Koski brings to the table. They are, of course, the hosts of The Next Picture Show, looking at cinema's present via its past, and their new pairing is inspired by Pavements. They're calling it Music Autobiography. They're pairing Pavements, of course. I brought up Dylan. They're pairing it with Todd Haynes's I'm Not There. You can hear that. New episodes of The Next Picture Show drop every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts. You managed to squeeze something in since your return from abroad. It's Bring Her Back, the Sally Hawkins as a psycho foster mom movie from the Australian directing team, Danny and Michael Philippou. You know, as a former foster dad, I had to recuse myself from reviewing this movie. Actually, it's just because the trailer looked creepy as hell, and you know I'm a scaredy cat. What did you think?
Oh man, I didn't even think about that with this plot, but yes. I don't think you have any Laura in you, Adam, which is the Sally Hawkins character.
Let's hope not.
This is a very impressive step forward for this sibling directing team, Danny and Michael Philippou. I like Talk to Me. It was one of those where it showed more promise, and they are delivering on that. Here, it is beyond creepy, disturbing in a ton of ways. They are definitely becoming auteurs of self-inflicted gore. So if that's a thing, you know, you don't really have time for, avoid this. But there's a lot of good stuff here in terms of real characterization and a firmer command of plot and a patience with the camera that's new that I think is good. But this really elevates because of Hawkins' performance. And I'm not going to say much more about it because we are doing that bonus episode for our Filmspotting family members, listing our favorite performances of the year so far soon. So, you know, become a family member, or if you are one, look forward to that if you want to hear me say more about Hawkins. But yeah, she's great. And overall with these two films, I won't go too much into the plot, but very interesting how the Philippous seem to be drawn to stories about people who refuse to accept death, attempt to subvert it, and then pay a really awful price. They explore that in very different ways in both movies, but it definitely seems to be something they're interested in, and I don't think it's just on a surface level. There's this one is also a very evocative meditation on the madness of grief that is, unnerving but impressively done.
Oliver lost his family just like you guys.
Does he look like Andy?
He's a beautiful boy. Just needed someone that could give him special care.
You look you in, Ollie?
So for horror fans, you've probably already seen this, but if not, it's in wide release. Make room for Bring Her Back. Let us know what you think. Feedback at filmspotting.net.
Archive!
That's from the opening of Andrei Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev, one of 5 titles in our Tarkovsky Blind Spots Marathon. The goal of this marathon, Josh, was not only to see blind spots, see some great movies or potentially great movies that we have never seen before, but to become completists of the Russian master's work. Not so hard. He only made 7 features. We have now done it. We have one more job to do. We have to complete the Marathon Awards, our favorite performances, scenes, and more. We're calling these awards the Holy Fools. The clip we came into the segment with features one of several Holy Fools featured in the work of Tarkovsky. At least I'm assuming he's a holy fool. He's jumping off a church in some kind of contraption like a hot air balloon. He is sailing away into the sky. It probably isn't going to end well for him. He has a whole lot of people who are shouting at him and urging him to not partake in this endeavor.
But he believes, Adam.
But he believes
he will fly.
It's all about faith. And you know what? He flies, at least for some period of time. So we thought that was as good a segue as any into our Holy Fool Awards. We have 5 categories: supporting performance, lead performance, our Tarkovsky moment, which we'll get into more once we approach that category, our favorite scene or best scene, and then finally, best picture. The films were The Steamroller and the Violin, Ivan's Childhood, Andrei Rublev, Stalker, and Nostalgia. Josh, our first category is supporting performances. I'll give you a few of the nominees here, maybe the complete list, but just a few names. From The Steamroller and the Violin, Vladimir Zamansky, who's Sergei. I believe he's the steamroller, or not the machine, but the guy driving it. From Ivan's Childhood, Masha Valentina Malyavina, Galtsev Evgeny Zarakov. From Andrei Rublev, Kirill Ivan Lapikov, Nikolai Grinko is Danil, and Nikolai Burliev is Boriska. From Stalker, there's maybe at least 3 different options, including Anatoly Solzhenitsyn, the writer, Nikolai Grinko, the professor, Nostalgia, Domenico, our holy fool, Erlen Josephson, or Domiziana Giordano, Eugenia. Do you have a winner from those options, Josh?
All worthy considerations. The runner-up for me was probably Giordano as the interpreter in Nostalgia, just especially in the context of the films we've seen, a refreshing foil to Tarkovsky's brooding men who we've been spending a lot of time with. I did appreciate her presence there, but I went for my winner with Nikolai Burliev in Andrei Rublev. This is a bit of a cheat because his performance in Rublev as Boriska, this boy bellmaker, it's obviously informed by his earlier performance in Ivan's Childhood, right? Where he's the title character.
Same.
So, you know, both of these performances have this beyond his years confidence for a young actor that's crucial to the characters. And I just think in Andrei Rublev, he anchors that crucial final revelatory section where Boriska really helps Rublev clarify his creative purpose to my reading. And it's a compelling performance in its own right.
Yeah, you said it very well. That's exactly the same line of reasoning I had, Josh. It was a little bit of a cheat because I was considering the really mature performance he gives in Ivan's Childhood. One of the standout, truly, I almost considered him for lead performance. He was my runner-up there. Some of the most haunting moments from any performer that we saw, lead or supporting, in this entire marathon were from Burliev. in Ivan's childhood. And again, he was very young then. He's young, of course, in Andrei Rublev as well. But I really did feel like it made sense to go with a holy fool in these categories, and especially in the supporting performance category. And that last chapter here, that chapter that features Boriska, you said it well. It is a crucial one in terms of us understanding the main character, that title character's transformation. And it's fun. It's a fun performance watching him make this up as he goes. right. Yeah. Which is really what he's doing. So we have the same choice there for supporting performance. Lead performance, Igor Fomchenko as Sasha. He's the one who plays the violin in the steamroller and the violin. We have Burliev for Ivan's childhood. Anatoly Solenitsyn again for Andrei Rublev, another person playing two characters in our marathon. Stalker playing the Stalker, Alexander Kadanovsky. And from Nostalgia, we have Oleg Yankovsky as Gorchakov. Where did you go with lead performance?
I went with Alexander Kadanovsky as the title figure in Stalker. And I think for me, it's because it's something this was one of the titles that I'd already seen in this marathon. And I think I came to appreciate that performance more on this revisit. The first time I was maybe just trying to keep up, basically, and saw him, figured I had him pegged. He's our guide.
Yeah.
When you first meet him, he's very stoic and reserved. And you're like, okay, I know what his purpose is. I'm going to try to wrap my mind around what else is going on. But on this watch, I realized, it's a really rich developing performance where he goes from turning very eager and almost giddy when he arrives in the zone. Later on, he becomes agitated when the writer and professor don't show enough deference to the place, and then angry and irate at the end about their lack of belief in it. So he is a believer, right? And the performance here captures the notion of approaching the divine with fear and trembling. I think that's what I came to realize on this watch with Kadanovsky. For me, he's the most magnetic of Tarkovsky's Holy Fools.
Зона — это очень сложная система ловушек, что ли. И все они смертельны. Не знаю, что здесь происходит в отсутствии человека. Но стоит тут появиться людям, как все здесь приходит в движение.
The word I had in my notes, Josh, was just his elusiveness. I felt like he was the hardest to grasp. And
slippery,
at first, he's slippery. And at first, you don't think he's going to be that way. You think he's going to be very stoic, driven by this mission, just focused on what he has to get done. And he has this kind of prophet's mission, if you will. But that isn't what he is. He shows that he's someone who has doubts as much as he also has faith. I feel like he is someone who shows that he doesn't always know exactly what he's doing, whether or not it's the right thing to do. He's making choices. And, you said magnetic. We do see from his performance, we see a lot of range. We see a range of emotion from him. And that's why he stood out to me as the top performance as well. I think we're going to have at least one other category in common here. These next two, I was going to say, are where we should diverge, but depending on how we interpret this next category, there is possibility of at least one more crossover. So Tarkovsky moment, the way we're sort of defining this is one of the ways we've talked about and thought about Tarkovsky as a filmmaker is as a bit of a sorcerer. He does things with the camera. He does things in nature and with nature that feel supernatural. It almost feels like he's manipulating time and space. Is that a good way to frame it? Because that's how we think. Yeah, that's how we think about it.
Couldn't have said it any better. Yeah, the with nature is the key part, I think.
Yeah. So what's your choice?
Boy, I mean, so many nominees. Let me just go through the list of nominees here to show you how I struggled with this. Andrei Rublev, I thought of the pagans frolicking in the mist. Stalker, I think, has 3. I talked a little bit about this in our review, but where the 3 of them are standing on a green hill in the zone at one point, and the sun just pierces through the fog and seems to anoint them. And then the fog comes back and the sun disappears. There's a quick shot at this well near the room, these ripples of dark water, a conjuring of something going on in there. And then again, almost a throwaway shot of a dry riverbed where a little dust devil suddenly forms. It's like, did he do that? Did he just happen to be there? You know, these sorts of things. Nostalgia, I think, also has 3. The opening shot of a woman, children, and the dog moving down a foggy hill. We spent a lot of time on that fixed shot of the poet's hotel room, where the adjustments to lighting, there's some water that seeps in, the dog comes in, you know, it just becomes this image of dreams, visions, and memories all at once. My winner is the third option I had from Nostalgia, though. And this is, I'm not sure how nature plays into this one, which is why it gave me pause, but I had to go with it. It is the final shot of Nostalgia. The poet, presumably this is after his death, it's implied. He's sitting on that misty hill from the opening shot. The dog is there next to him, this recurring figure. There are buildings positioned behind him we've seen, which perhaps are his childhood home, but they seem to be miniaturized in a way because all of this is taking place inside that roofless abbey that we saw earlier in the film. Whatever techniques were employed, I can't say without deep research, I'm sure, but it just evokes the work of a sorcerer.
Yeah.
And an apt name to my mind for this shot is Sitting in Eternity. It's just what that possibly seems to be trying to evoke.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. And we spent some time on that when we talked about Nostalgia a few weeks ago. And that scene right before it is one I thought about as well, with the writer character and the candle, of course, for best scene, which we'll get to in a moment. But I thought about it for this category as well. So many possibilities here. You know, I went back to the very first film. We talked about the steamroller and the violin, and the violin lesson and the water, playing the violin, and the way he pans over and shows the glass and the way the water is reflected, which for me was a way of expressing something ineffable that's happening as he's playing the violin, a sort of reverie that's happening. And then you go to Andrei Rublev, and we talked about this as well, the brushes that are in the water, and when they're washed, and the way then that creates new ripples that are kind of undulating, these new waves, right? In Stalker, and all of these are candidates for me as well that you have to think about as just the best scenes from the marathon as well.
Right.
That transition, that long train ride that transitions us into the zone and going from that sepia tone into color, the hypnotic nature of that. No special effects. It's all just done with the long take, the way the subtle editing is used, the electronic score, and then of course that transition to color. It's something. Nostalgia, the opening, the parting of those barn doors, and it's a portal from color, the present, to black and white, the past. And I mentioned the penultimate scene before your last shot, where we watch the writer cross that now dry lake or bed of water, whatever was there before, the test of his faith. So many that we could point to. I did go with, this is where I thought we could end up with the same one because I knew you would at least strongly consider it. I am going with Gorchakov in his hotel room, the still hotel shot. And I do think of it as a nature shot, partly, but I also think of it.
There's rain.
There's rain. And I also think of it as a magician shot. I think of it as a conjuring shot because of the way the camera is fixed, the way those walls feel almost like a painter's canvas in the background, the way the water is just coming in through the windows a little bit, and the sound that it makes is something that adds just kind of a neat little effect that adds to a sleepy quality, a hypnotic quality to it. And the way that main character is sleeping on the bed, but the way the darkness, the way the room is lit, it's as if he sort of disappears into the bed. And then, as you said, all of a sudden, the dog from his past appears. You know, this is the moment where everything blurs together, where past and present completely collide. In a similar way to what I described with the barn doors later, we know that he's been having these visions, but this is where it's happening, where we see it happening. It's not something that's inside his head. We're actually witness to it. And it's before our eyes that Tarkovsky plays it all out. It just stunned me the first time I saw it in nostalgia.
Yeah. Yeah, great pick.
Не увлекайся, Саша, не увлекайся. И перестань скачиваться.
That brings us to best scene. Do you have a single scene that captured the marathon for you?
3 were in contention. I did consider the carrying the candle more of a sustained scene for this quality, but I totally get why you thought about it for the sorcerer moment. The other one was Will the Bell Ring in Andrei Rublev. You know, you suggested the enjoyment level of that whole final section of watching this kid try to pull this off. It leads to this sequence of intense, suspense. And I just love how that is handled. But I went with the finale of Stalker, where Stalker's daughter, she's called Monkey, is moving the glasses with her mind. And it's the first time you see it, I have to imagine you can't suspect that's coming. But as soon as it starts happening, you know exactly why. And that it absolutely had to happen. It's to me, it's the movie's evidence for the metaphysical against, the arguments of the writer and the professor to the contrary and others. We are back out of the zone. We're where things should be rational and scientific and understandable, and maybe not.
Yeah.
So telekinetic monkey, that's best scene.
So I'm going with a moment that I devoted a lot of time to during our first discussion, and it could be seen as a single shot, but I am thinking about the entire sequence, and it's the suspended kiss among the birches in Ivan's childhood. And the reason I am thinking of it as an entire sequence is, well, one, I do like the fact that we're getting the birches in there, which is something Tarkovsky returns to again and again throughout the films that we saw. Something about those white trees, something about them from his childhood, perhaps we read something about, or I saw somewhere, something about the innocence of that, or from that time in his life that he clearly responded to. And this is an exchange between an innocent character, a female character, and a military man in charge who has designs on her that are not innocent in nature, that are definitely very sexually charged. And we are very nervous for her as viewers. And she's nervous. There's a lot of anxiety as they are walking amongst those birches. Nothing really does end up happening that is abusive or terribly untoward. In a moment, she walks along this tree that is elevated. It's down on the ground. It's fallen and it's elevated over a crevice. And he actually steps out over it first and grabs her and takes her out over this crevice. And he holds her. He holds her in the air, suspends her over this, and kisses her. It's this grand gesture. And he holds her there and then, allows her to pass on the other side. So it's this moment where she didn't ask for it. And in that way, it's not romantic, Josh, or it shouldn't be. She doesn't back away from it. There's an element of beauty to it in the way he films it, the way she's suspended there. There's something graceful about it, but it is also something where, the word I think I used when we talked about it was there's something obscene about it. There's something where he's forcing himself on her, and the whole scene has been about him building up to that. And for me, it also captures, it's just an incredible view The shot itself is so Tarkovskian, where it's this low angle shot of him holding her suspended in the air. And everything about the framing of it is like a masterclass of cinematography. But then it's also this shot that encapsulates the beautiful and the brutal that I think he is always wrestling with.
Yeah, beyond even all those complicated layers you're describing going on in terms of character and narrative, to speak to the beauty of it, groves of birch trees or sometimes aspen groves are used this way. Common in films because they are so striking, and just the lines, and especially in black and white. To understand why we've been going on and on throughout this marathon and blubbering about how beautiful certain shots are, all you have to do is see this scene and then compare it to any other movie with birches in it. And you'll realize no one knows what they're doing for something like this, like Tarkovsky. In this case, we should note, working with cinematographer Vadim Yusov, that there's just an eye here, as you described it, an eye for noticing and framing and lighting and capturing these locations in nature that's unlike anything else, except maybe like Ansel Adams photography is what comes to mind in terms of this particular shot. It's a beautiful one.
So I know as we get to Best Picture and we wrap up our Holy Fool Tarkovsky Marathon Awards, I know that you have already posted your letterboxed list, your official ranking, since you are a completist. You have all of the Tarkovsky films ranked. I have not posted mine yet, but I do have my list ready. It's in private mode. I've been waiting for this conversation. I've been waiting to make my list here to finally post that. And this was really, really hard, as I will explain a little bit more about in a moment. What is your pick for Best Picture? And is it possible that your pick for Best Picture is, in fact, your best Tarkovsky film, your number one overall?
Yeah, it is. And I will say before I get into it that Andrei Rublev, which was my major blind spot, for me, the main reason to do this marathon, gave my pick for my favorite a good challenge. But it was that second, I think only my second look at Stalker, the first Tarkovsky that I did ever see, that cemented it as my personal favorite of this marathon and of all of his, just irresistibly for me combined sci-fi and spirituality, endlessly mysterious. I have by no means have it figured out. I have a little better idea, I think, this second time around. But yeah, it's at the top for me. And, as I'm sure you'll probably get into, the reason this is so hard is now I'm counting, if we use, when you're talking about masterpieces, all-time masterpieces, this is where the 5-star letterbox rating is a little more helpful. I've got 3 all-time masterpieces from him: Stalker, Andrei Rublev, Nostalgia. And then I've got here, in the 4.5 out of 5 range, I've got Solaris, The Sacrifice, and Mirror, which we did a couple of years ago. And then it's just great films. Ivan's Childhood and The Steamroller and the Violin.
Yeah.
So this wasn't an easy pick, but I do feel good where I landed with Stalker.
Yeah. So as I've said before, I still have Solaris, not part of this marathon, but part of a previous, long ago, maybe the second marathon that was ever done on this show. Solaris was part of that, and I still have it as my number one. And maybe if I rewatched it now in light of having seen all of these other films, that wouldn't be the case. For me, that film, the concept, the central idea, the central question of that film is still the one that just grabs me the most, that excites me the most to think about.
Yeah.
That's the reason why it's still number one. But as you were just talking about, I looked at my letterbox list. I gave Andrei Rublev, Nostalgia, and Stalker, and for that matter, Mirror, which was part of another marathon we did a few marathons back. I gave those 4 films 4.5 stars. How do you pick? How do you pick between those 4 movies? Which one's going to be number 2? And I certainly could have made the case for myself to not go with Stalker, because then I'd have, I suppose, 2 sci-fi movies in the top 2 spots. But I ultimately decided I don't care.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I know he made 2 more films after this with Nostalgia, which obviously I think is great, and Sacrifice, which I don't like quite as much as you, but I also could stand to rewatch. Stalker, I guess just feels to me, Josh, and I have Rublev third, so again, it's really close. But Stalker feels to me like it could be the apotheosis from a filmmaking standpoint, from a faith standpoint, from his wrestling with the need for art and beauty in a brutal world, as I said, standpoint. It feels like it's all there. And from just a standpoint too of when I think about the Tarkovsky films, I want to revisit. And I do feel like they're films you're going on a journey with, like the characters. You're going on a journey, right? Other than Solaris, the one where I feel like, okay, I'm ready to get back on the train. I'm ready. When we talked about it, I said, it's one of those movies you have to get on the same rhythm with it. You have to want to get on that rhythm. Well, I'm ready. I could do that again. I want to get on that train again. I want to re-enter the zone. I want to reconsider its mysteries and all the enigmas. I'm okay with it. It feels to me like one of those films. And I'm not saying the other films aren't as well, but I'm saying Stalker to me, just slightly above the others, feels to me like the one that you could dust off at minimum every couple of years, but probably every year and just say,
absolutely.
It's time. It's Stalker time. I got to do it, right?
I don't know what time of year that would be, but that would be a worthy enterprise. I thought you might go with Andrei Rublev.
Yeah, it was close,
to be honest. And as I said, the one that was pushing at a possibility for Best Picture for me. But yeah, a lot of crossover for us this time.
It was. That'll do it. Officially, it's over. Our Tarkovsky marathon. We don't have another one planned for this year. We're getting, into summer here and then fall and then end of year. But of course, we will have another one on the books for next year. We'll keep you posted as those plans emerge. More about our marathons. There are over 50 of them now. That info is available at filmspotting.net/marathons. Josh, that's our show.
You can find Adam and the show on Instagram and Facebook and Letterboxd at Filmspotting. I'm at Larson on Film. We are independently produced and listener supported. You can support the show by joining the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. You can listen early and ad-free that way. You'll also get a weekly newsletter, monthly bonus episodes, and access to the entire show archive. For show t-shirts and other merch, go to filmspotting.net/shop.
In that show archive, mostly reverse chronological here, lots of Wes. The Doll Shorts, 940. Asteroid City, 925. French Dispatch, 847. We did a Rushmore Sacred Cow. That was fun, 630. Isle of Dogs and our top 5 Wes Anderson scenes. At some point, we're going to have to revisit that and redo it, aren't we?
Yeah,
674.
Or maybe, as we've been talking about performances, like characters or performances is a good one sometime.
Okay. Royal Tenenbaum's Sacred Cow. That was with Sam Van Halgren, even though he doesn't appreciate Royal Tenenbaums enough. 589. Grand Budapest Hotel, 481. Moonrise Kingdom. That was episode 400 live with Dana Stevens and Michael Phillips. Somehow it looks like Mr. Fox did not get a full review.
So
Darjeeling,
good.
Darjeeling Limited was reviewed back on 181, and that's where I interviewed Wes Anderson and Jason Schwartzman. It's kind of sad, though, that that's the only time I've talked to Wes Anderson in the show's history was 181, and a little bit of crossover with another movie that came up on this show. Jason Schwartzman is in Pavements with Alex Ross Perry. He's also in at least one other Alex Ross Perry film, top of mind, which is Listen Up, Philip.
Yeah.
And I interviewed Jason Schwartzman for Listen Up, Philip. The Life of Quadic, we talked about that on a May 2020 bonus episode. And Sam has written in here, Bottle Rocket 30th Anniversary Sacred Cow in 2026.
Let's do it.
Sure. Streaming, you can see Echo Valley. Julianne Moore gets a visit from her addict daughter, played by Sydney Sweeney, and becomes an accomplice to murder, with Donald Gleason as a sleazy dealer. In limited release, you can see The Ballad of Suzanne Cesar. Mariah Gates says, an experimental meditation on who owns history, a sumptuous and thought-provoking film. That's at the Siskel. Prime Minister is also out in limited release. This is a documentary about the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and this is a movie that played at Sundance. Documentary I saw, recommend it, definitely worth seeing. Out in wide release, you can see the live-action adaptation of How to Train Your Dragon. That's the 2010 animated film, and Materialist, Celine Song's follow-up to 2023's Past Lives with Dakota Johnson and Pedro Pascal and Chris Evans. We plan to talk about that next week, along with Mike Flanagan's Stephen King adaptation, The Life of Chuck, which is expanding.
Filmspotting is produced by Golden Joe Dassault and Sam Van Halgren. Without Sam and Golden Joe, this show wouldn't go. Our production assistant is Sophie Kempenaar. Special thanks to everyone at WBEZ Chicago. More information is available at wbez.org. For Filmspotting, I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar. Thanks for listening.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.